Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, and you guys know the routine. I'm here to bring you my list that will be facing off against Lane later tonight in a pseudo practice for this weekend. This weekend, Lane, myself, as well as Zach and G will be teaming up in a 4v4 style tournament at North Coast Games this weekend. This tournament, we will have to partner up with each of the partners on our team for one game in a 3-round event. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. This last weekend, I'm going to let Lane talk to you about it more. Lane and G actually went to a team event for some practice, and they finished first overall. Congratulations to those guys. And speaking of which, Necrons this weekend. Hyper Crypt winning LVO out of nowhere. Such good things. Great to see Necrons. You know, a couple years ago, looking at Necrons to win LVO would have been unheard of. The codex was weak and it just wouldn't happen. Now, we are going to see some balanced data slates, so some of the Necron dynasties, detachments, and what we've been seeing may have to change, may have to evolve. But, you know, Necrons, we always come back. So we'll see what that's going to be after we see some of those data sheets and stuff. As well with the fact, Lane has been on a roll with his Death Watch Devastating Wounds list. That has been something of something very unique. I haven't seen it. We haven't seen this at all, except for what Lane's been bringing, and want to keep prepping him and get this thing ready, because right now, for Lane, myself, and a couple others that we practice with, his list has the hot hand. So we're going to be looking to get to a GT, get his list out there, and try and see if we can't get him to bring home his own trophy from one of these events. That'd be really cool for him and for, you know, our community around. But in that process, that means Lane's going to have to run the gauntlet. So what better way to take all of this going on right now and you take the Grey Knights and bring them out here on the channel. Now, the Grey Knights play very similar to the Hypercrypt Legion, except for one thing. The Grey Knights are more resilient in ways that the Necrons are not. A lot more 2-up saves, a lot more inmulns, a lot more things to do to have these things be more defensive. So today, Lane will be facing off against my Grey Knights by teleporting, bouncing around the map Grey Knights. And before we get into them, as always, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do turn on the bell to get notified on all the content we bring you here on the channel. And yeah, let's jump over and talk about the Grey Knights, and then we'll talk about more about what we're trying to do with these guys and what our plans are for this match. All right, here we go. Here is the Grey Knights that I will be playing against Lane this evening. Now, this is pretty much the list I've been running most of the edition, and I've had a lot of success with it, with some minor changes. You know, I made some tweaks here and there, you know, just little things like tightening the bolts, trying to get some better play out of things. Some stuff that I've run in the past was the Tech Marine, as well as the Purgation Squad. Being able to have 4 side cannons and some indirect fire was nice. But since we don't really receive any way of making the indirect fire technically better, the Purgation Squad doesn't really hit. Now, late in the game, the Purgation Squad's able to teleport and just hit something hard, direct line of sight, which I absolutely love. Indirect, not so much. In this list, I took them out, as well as the Tech Marine with the multi-meltas. I did like Tech Marine, but it kind of at some times would play against some of the other synergies with my list. I think it's a very good unit. I think in some different builds, both of these units could be very, very, very strong. I may come back to the Purgation Squad here at some point, but with my strengths and the things I like, those guys are coming out today. And that's going to also be to bring in some other stuff that I will be playing this weekend, so I can get more time to practice them, because there is 2 specific units that I haven't had a lot of time with, and I need more time with. All right, enough about that. Let's get over to the list and talk about it. So, for starters, 4 characters. Not quite enough for my opponent to want to pick Assassinate, but when Assassinate gets drawn, there's a good chance my opponent's going to be able to hit that, because one of my characters will be probably floating out there and able to be taken down. Specifically, the 2 librarians. So these 2 librarians that I'm taking are going to be by themselves. They are solo Libbies. First one up we have is this my old school pewter librarian that's been with me forever. He will have first to the fray, because He's the first librarian I had, first to the fray. It fits, it really does, and it helps me just so I can remember who's who. First to the fray means he can deep strike on turn one, and with that, that means I can drop in, score some secondaries, or threaten a primary point on turn one that I might not normally be able to get to without putting a unit in a bad position. One thing about this army is because I have a lot of infantry, I can hide in runes really nicely. A lot of 5-man squads, a lot of small MSU, we can hide. Well, a single librarian character can hide really, really well to stand on that objective to score me points, and with Grey Knights being able to pick up, I can pick this guy up and bring him back down somewhere else. Much like all the librarians in Grey Knights, he does have a lot of damage output that can randomly dish out a bunch of mortal wounds, which can be cool, especially if I put him into a position of going after other 5-man units that are secondary or primary objective holding units that my opponent's expecting me not to go after. Librarian at 100 points, good utility going in there. As well as my second librarian, which is the newer model, and he will have the Sigil of Exigence. Now, the Sigil is usually better suited for being in a unit, to protect that unit so when that unit gets shot at, they can jump away. For this, during the team tournament, my librarian will have the Sigil, same one, and I want to practice that today. My thought is that this allows me to play the librarian in some more aggressive positions to score points that my opponent may not be able to charge and engage, but he could shoot at them. I've already scored my secondary points that I need to for the turn, pick the librarian up, put him somewhere safe, pick him up at the end of turn, and put him out somewhere better and more aggressive moving forward with the game. So that's going to be how these two librarians run, and I'm running them by themselves again because that's how I will be running them this weekend. Now, that does not mean that the Terminators that I'm bringing do not have a character joining them, because they will have the Grand Master. This Grand Master is going to have Inescapable Wrath, which allows him to get +1 to the charge. I'm still having PTS after Lane and mine's last game, where I failed 2 5-inch charges by rolling a 4 back to back in the same turn. It's right there, like literally rolled one, rolled the other, both for a 5-inch, and I rolled a 4. Well, we're not doing that. We got +1 to our charge. We're getting in there. We're going to make that charge happen. Needless to say, that's kind of nice. Being able to turn a 9-inch charge into an 8-inch charge is helpful. And again, being able to get these guys onto an objective and charge onto an objective will be helpful. Now, most part, these guys, their objective control 3 value is what I want to protect more. The Grand Master gives them the ability to he gives them more combat prowess. And after people actually can whittle through the Terminators, here's a guy that still packs a wallop and a punch with a good invuln, good toughness, good amount of wounds, and can still smack himself. We can zero out a battle tactic strat for this unit once per game, as it's still only once per game for Grey Knights. And as well, when they charge, they will gain lethal hits from him, I believe it is. And they will, he is just all around a very, very strong choice. Last up of my characters is going to be Castellan Crow. Crow, I have been running all edition long with his Purifier Brick, and they'll be back again too. The Castellan Crow gives the Purifiers +1 to their Purifying Flame, as well as the fact of giving them just a big beastly character to help get them out of combat, because while some of the combat is good, again, they are anti-infantry, and this makes them even better for anti-infantry. So, I'm sorry, the Grandmaster prevents them from prevents any modifications. That's what it is. They can't modify any of the statistics. But back to Crow. Crow will boost the squad to make it a super huge anti-infantry, which is one of the things I try to do with this list. If you don't have any infantry, you can't walk through runes to get to objectives, which buys me time and turn to just score points. And that's the goal with the Purifiers. This is a brick that can drop in and just vaporize the squad. Now, we talked about those units a little bit, but we'll jump into and talk about them a little more here in a second. Let's move over to the big boys. So we got the Land Raider. The Land Raider is one that may be coming out here soon. His role and goal is more or less to pick up the lighter armored vehicles, such as transports and armatures even. And he does well into those matchups. By putting the infantry on the table, it allows me to then go after the infantry with other units, pick those up, and then slow my opponent's ability to score. Now, the thing with the Land Raider is he's big. He's difficult to hide. And with some of the power increases we've seen, especially with Lane's Dev Wound list, it makes me start wondering if he's going to really be able to survive long enough to pack that punch. So we'll see how he functions tonight. I still like him. There's a lot of cool tricks that I can use with the Land Raider to pop the interceptors out and move them really, really far to get onto objectives and score secondaries, but a Rhino can do that as well. As also with the fact that a Rhino could get the scout benefit from my strike squad if those are inside as well. So it's something I've thought about, but Grey Knights do have a lack of anti-tank. The Land Raider is one that does that very well with the las cannon 100 color missile array. These are things that I really like. So I'm back and forth on it. We'll see how it does tonight. And so far, I've had good success with it. Yes, I've lost it on turns 1 and 2 in the past. And I've had some games it's made it all the way to the end. So it's hit or miss. Now, the other of my big boys who's going to be sticking around is my Nemesis Dread Knight. This guy basically equals spend 1 command point, spend 1 command point, do 6 mortal wounds on the tank shock. That hammer on this guy is just amazing. The fact that he can advance and charge, and his advance is auto 6, is to me what gives him the leg up over the Grandmaster Dread Knight. Grandmaster Dread Knight can do some rerolls. That's cool. I'd rather have the speed. Now, the guns on the Dread Knight are actually not that bad when it comes to taking down infantry, which is tending to be the theme of the entire Grey Knight army. Now, versus vehicles, not so much. Better strength, it's still that AP, because we want those hits to land to get home and do some damage. Still not there. That's okay. If we can just pick up all the infantry and really prevent infantry from getting through runes and getting to us, then we can outscore, outlive, outlast, and win the game. It's about keeping up on the scoreboard and slowing our opponent's ability to score down. So the Dread Knight does well with that. Also a very good target for some of my strats like the True Silver Armor. Being able to have a Dread Knight in cover that's still sitting on a 2-up through AP2 weapons can be really obnoxious, similar with the Land Raider. Now over to my infantry. So first of all, we have 2 5-man squads of strike. No characters with these guys today. Very simple. They have a side cannon, 2 wounds apiece, 2-up save, which is a Grey Knight thing. We have basically 2-ups all over. And these guys have sticky objectives. Now, sticky objectives is something that I don't really think is talked about as much as it should be. Late in the game, Lane's lists, in a lot of the way he plays, he does have units he can pick up. That's not every army. And being able to sticky an objective with a small elite army such as this one and leave and go do something else is critical. So having the 2 units that can do this is really, really nice. Sometimes I may not be able to sticky that home objective exactly on turn 1 and get out of there. By having 2 units, I can get that one stickied while still having another unit go to another objective to start planting a flag and making that one sticky, to then move on with other things in the game. Our opponent now needs to get over there, tag the objective to take it away from us, and that might pull them out of position. And at the same time, too, with things like interceptors, we can simply just get there and get it right back if they don't dedicate enough to really hold that objective. If they dedicate a lot to hold the objective and we left that area, now we're not expending resources. And having guys like this that can do sticky objectives is something I think is really critical in up-down lists like this one. Next up, we have one of my favorite units, the Interceptors. Man, if we still had Combat Squad, I'd be taking 30 of them. But Combat Squad is not a thing. So instead, I'll be running 3 5-man units of Interceptors. The 3 5-man Interceptors are able to fire and fade. They have a 12-inch move. They can deep strike, lay land, and then it's a new phase. They shoot, They move 6. They can steal objectives. They can steal home objectives. They can score engage on all fronts. They can score behind enemy lines. There is a lot that these guys can do because of that utility. They are one of the strongest units in this build because of the fact of how versatile they can be. Not to mention the fact just having a unit that can jump out behind a wall, shoot you, and then jump right back behind a wall. There's a reason people like Eldar. There's a reason why people use those units in Eldar, such as Warp Spiders. Next up, my more character-led units, we have the Terminators. Like I talked about before, this is a 5-man squad. They will have a banner to give them an OC3, an apothecary to heal guys, and the Grand Master who's going to be leading them. But the Terminators themselves have a decent amount of attacks. And like I mentioned before, the Grand Master will give them the ability to ignore modifiers to their characteristics if they so choose that don't involve saves, which means that they'll always be able to hit on their, ignore it minuses the hit and minuses the wound and stuff like that. These guys have a good attack profile. They're Terminators. They hit. Good amount of damage. They're solid. Very, very strong with the OC3, being able to dedicate 2 guys onto an objective and have OC6 and not really be fully invested so our opponent can't just charge and draw a whole unit on there is really nice. And being able to heal the guys as well, too. So if our opponent thinks they can just whittle us down one by one, no, we'll bring them back one by one and counter that. So I like having a 1-5-man brick to do that, being a more aggressive unit, being able to take objectives that are in a little more dangerous positions, but still be safe for the long-term scheme of the game. Grandmaster as well, they're a vessel for him because he can punch and really beat up some units. And last, saving the best for last, one of my favorite units so far out of Grey Knights, other than the Interceptors for their play, this is for damage, and this is the Purifiers. As I mentioned with Castle and Crow leading this squad, their Purifying Flame will be going from 1 to 2 shots that have Anti-Infantry 2 up, AP1 ignore cover. They will then also have 4 Incinerators, 4d6 auto hitting, AP1 ignore cover, then a bunch of Storm Bolters. And then if that doesn't work, if that doesn't finish off your target, we'll try and stick a 9-inch charge, because we'll probably be deep striking back in. Castle and Crow leading the squad makes them very, very strong, and they are a very strong anti-infantry unit, being able to take on most units in the game and really hurt them to a point that they're not as efficient going into the next round, or just gone entirely. Things like Terminators are able to stop these guys because Armor of Contempt can keep them on a 2-up and slow them down. But they can still remove quite a bit of those Terminators to make their efficiency not as good, especially at the angles they can cut. Throwing these guys right out in the middle to try and take on a horde by themselves, probably not the best idea. But using these guys like a scalpel and finding angles and picking off units on the corner and just drawing my opponent into the middle can be really nice. Not to mention as well, when this squad goes and moves up on objective, while they're only OC1, they do make an opponent think, do I have enough to take this squad out? Or am I just going to move into a unit that can A, pick up off the field and move away, or B, may overwatch me with some flamers and a whole bunch of purifying flames that any of those 6s to hit most likely are probably going to wound with that anti-infantry ability. So that is the list that I was bringing tonight. So as I mentioned, we are going to be going to North Coast Games this weekend. We have this event that's been planned for about 2 months, I believe. Big event, actually, quite a bit of people coming out there. And I will be playing Grey Knights. So this is going to be a practice for myself on the Grey Knights that I'm going to be running, getting used to some of the stuff. The list I'm running is only 1,000 points. So some changes are there. Things I'm going to be still running are the Purifiers, 2 squads of Interceptors, the Strike, I have 1 unit of them, as well as the 2 Librarians. I think that's basically it. Yeah, 2 Interceptors, 2 Librarians, Purifiers, Strike. Sounds like a list. Sounds like what it is. And that's what I'm going to be taking this weekend. Now, in that pairing, what I'm going to be doing in a lot of these missions is focusing on the secondaries, focusing on scoring. I do have some stuff that can do damage, but my primary thing is going to be making sure that my partner doesn't have to worry about that and can be aggressive with damage and just push. So that's going to be a lot of my role. So today it's going to be practicing that and practicing the librarians, which is something that I haven't used very much. With the changes to this list, though, I do like a lot of the changes. I have to get a little more time with the librarians because I see what they can do versus what I have done with them. And also, one change I'm making, my librarians will not have combat weapons. They'll have bolters instead of combat weapons. I really don't like the combat weapon. The combat weapon is one shot or two rapid fire. Yes, it's anti-infantry 4 up, which is a dev wound, but it hits on a 4. And I'm finding myself missing more times than not with it and just forgetting to shoot it even because I'm just like, well, I'm going to miss with it. It's not doing it. So I like the bolter. I figure bolter, if I'm going into that infantry, I can just spray into something and hope for the best. And I'm Grey Knights. We like our bolters. So that is kind of some of the formations and the plays in there. I still, like I said, I have the interceptors. So you'll do a lot of secondary play. Purifiers will be in both lists, and just because of how devastating they are to infantry. You know, you hear me say a lot that Grey Knights lack anti-tank, anti-monster, anti-vehicle, a lot of that. And this is very true. But what we lack in that, we make up with a lot of anti-infantry. So I'm trying to utilize that anti-infantry side of things to remove my opponent's threats from the table so that my opponent is not able to, one, score some of those secondaries because they might be limited with terrain, and two, not stop me from scoring mine or not take away primary points where I can just start running away with the primary score by being on objectives. All right, well, that's the game plan. We'll be facing off against Lane and his dev wound, so that's going to be scary because my 2-up save won't matter when he's hitting on a dev wound. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.